This is Heather Orr with Bootleg Legal, and today I'm going to talk to you about COVID-19 and how it affects small businesses. Mainly, I'm going to tell you about the different avenues that small businesses can take advantage of in order to make sure that they are alive on the other side of COVID-19 and this quarantine. First, I just want to start out by pointing out what is probably obvious to everybody right now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. This is a very tough time for everybody. I can't think of a time in any of our lifetimes, perhaps not since World War II, when there was this level of collective anxiety. And it's everywhere that you look. And there are definitely people, trying to make the most of it. I consider myself one of them, but that doesn't really change the fact that we are in this state of complete unpredictability. So I'm going to acknowledge that this is scary, but I'm also going to tell you that in times of crisis, there is opportunity. In fact, some of the most ripe opportunity out there is born in times of crisis. The people who are able to stay flexible, a little nimble, pivot their business when they need, or even start a new business, might find that this is the best thing that ever happened to their professional life. They may be able to come out of this stronger than they ever were before. However, if you're one of the businesses trying to survive this and you're worried about your survival, this video is more for you. So, to start with, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act probably should have just been Coronavirus Response Act. Didn't really need Families First in there. Now it's a mouthful, but okay. This act covers many things. I'm going to talk about the sick leave program. So under the FFCRA, every employee of a company with 500 or fewer employees is entitled to 2 weeks of sick leave. And that sick leave can be used for 6 delineated categories of things. And I'm not going to read them all to you. You can find them online, or you can reach out and I can analyze it in the context of your business. But essentially, the first 3 categories, one of which is this employee is actually physically sick themselves. In the first 3 categories, they're going to be entitled to full pay for up to 10 days at their normal rate. Now, this paid sick time it will expire on December 31st. It does not carry over. And if someone is terminated or quit, it does not have to be paid out. Also, businesses can immediately take a tax credit for the money that they spend on this sick leave program. Okay? So it's not even something you have to wait till next year to do. Yeah, it comes out of your employment tax. It's an employment tax credit. The bottom 3 categories, you get paid at 2/3 your rate. Like one of these categories is a worker has to stay home to take care of their child because they don't have childcare and they're unable to work. So they wouldn't get their full benefits, but they would get 2/3. Okay. So this works in conjunction with the FMLA, which is unpaid. And it basically gives you a way to pay your employees for 2 weeks of them either actually being sick or being required to stay home for a mandatory state-ordered quarantine, or because they don't have childcare, among other things, like I said. And basically the government is going to pay for it. Okay, so this is generally a good thing. There's also paycheck protection loans that were available, which have now run out. Unfortunately, too many people applied for them. There are also SBA loans and grants that small businesses can get in the meantime. It is said that if you apply for the small business loan, even if you're not approved for the loan, you can get up to a $10,000 grant, free and clear. The interest rate for for-profit businesses is 3.5%. The interest rate for nonprofits is 2.5%. So very good interest rates. Look into that if that's something that you're interested in. Okay. Now, what if your business is closed because of a stay-at-home order in your state or city and you're unable to operate? What do you do about your employees? Okay, several options. You can lay them off And remember, if you lay them off, you have to comply with all of the other requirements when you have to comply with when you lay someone off, like giving them their final paycheck timely and paying out any owed PTO time, etc. These rules haven't changed. They're the same rules, but they would apply even if you're laying somebody off with the intention of rehiring them. So temporary layoff, aka furlough, both of those are being employed by a lot of businesses while we're on hold, but they do intend to hire their employees back. So in those situations, it is a layoff and it needs to be treated as one. Now, what if you have part-time employees who can work a little bit, perhaps work from home, or even you're an essential business. You're just an essential business experiencing a slowdown, and so you are going to have to decrease hours. If you are decreasing the hours of an hourly employee, you're probably fine. You just pay them for the actual hours that they work. If you are dealing with an exempt employee, usually a salaried employee, you need to be very careful. If they answer even one email while at home, they are now entitled to that entire week's salary. Okay, so most people, if you are instructing your exempt employees not to work from home, you should probably disable their email access and their phones just so that they're not tempted to work, because like I said, if they work, you pay them for the entire week. Now, people have also asked, well, what happens if I just give them less work and we agree to lower payment just to get us through this time and they're an exempt employee? It might work, but you really do need to talk to an attorney, because if any discount in pay brings them below the threshold for being an exempt employee, because there's a monetary threshold, they have to make double the minimum wage. If it brings them below that number, then your whole year of classifying them as an exempt employee could be in jeopardy, among other things. So talk to a lawyer if you're dealing with possibly reducing the hours or the pay of an exempt employee. If you have employees that are working from home now, you have to follow all of the laws that you would ordinarily have to follow if you had employees working from home, which is to say you need to pay for their internet, or at least a proportion of the internet that they're using on your business, which it's pretty impossible to figure out. So you probably just need to pay for their internet, or a reasonable amount of it. You might need to pay for their phone if they're using their phone for work purposes. Anything else that they are spending money on so that they can work from home, it needs to be on your tab. Because if you fail to pay it, you could be liable for waiting time penalties. Waiting time penalties in California mean that for every day you're late making a payment, you owe them an entire day's salary, up to 30 days. So when employers, even if you fail to just pay them one day of their vacation time, their accrued vacation time when they quit or are fired, if they wait 30 days, you now owe them that one day plus 30. Well, plus 20, because there's 20 days in a month. But anyway, be very careful. Err on the side of covering too much, not only because it's the fair thing to do, but also because the risk is pretty substantial that you could be on the hook for like pretty large fines down the road. So that takes care of those options with regard to employees. What about other contracts? What about contracts that you might have with your vendors, your landlord, anybody else? Okay, buckle up for this one, because it's going to get a little bit policy wonky. It's going to get a little bit in the weeds because it is a complicated issue. So the first step is to look at the contract and see if you have a force majeure clause. Force majeure means superior force, act of God. It basically means something outside of our control came in and disrupted this contract or our ability to perform this contract, and one or both of us now needs out of it. It's an unforeseeable event, blah, 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 blah. So you're going to want to read that clause, or have an attorney read that clause, to see if the way that it's written would cover something like COVID-19. If it's broad enough, if it specifically mentions a pandemic, great. Moving forward, they will all mention pandemics. Every force majeure clause that's going to be drafted from this point forward, but most of them don't. So, and throughout the past, courts have been very hesitant to let people out on force majeure clause unless the force majeure clause like specifically identified the cause, earthquake, tsunami, war, pandemic, right? And so if it didn't, list that specific cause, most courts would not hold that a party could get out of the contract. I suspect a slight revision in case law coming out of this. I think that if there are contracts that are truly impossible or impracticable to perform, courts are going to be a little bit more lenient with that specificity requirement, and they're probably going to let people out of contracts if they have general language that might encompass a pandemic. That's just my fortune telling. I could turn out to be wrong, but that's where I see this probably headed. So that's step one. Do you have a force majeure clause, and does it have language that would cover something like COVID-19? If you don't, all hope is not lost. From there, you're going to want to look at the basis of your contract. What was the point of this contract? I'm delivering X, they're giving me Y. There are theories in common law called impossibility and frustration of purpose. Impossibility / impracticability, because nothing's really impossible. Impracticability and possibility basically says, okay, the terms that we agreed to at the beginning of the agreement no longer really make any sense for us. So, this has been used in wartime where getting certain supplies was going to cost 10 times more than the parties anticipated when they entered it into the contract. And so it became economically unfeasible. It doesn't make sense. One party would lose so much money that it just doesn't make sense. And so the court would let you out on those grounds. Like, this unforeseeable act happened that is neither one of our faults, but it basically renders it either impossible to perform or just so economically unfeasible that it doesn't make sense. Then you have frustration of purpose. The entire purpose of this contract was for me to sing at somebody's graduation party, and now graduation parties are prohibited. I obviously can't do this. The whole purpose of the contract has been frustrated, and courts will generally let you out of it on those grounds. So these are complicated enough to where I'm not going to waste more time on it, because if you really do need to use one of these theories of law to get out of a contract, you really should probably talk to a lawyer because they're really complicated. And there's a whole bevy of case law and going in both directions. And so you're going to need somebody to parse that out for you. But the reality is that most people right now are pretty sensitive to the need to modify and terminate contracts that don't make sense. I'm working with a lot of clients on both sides of that. So it's a really good time, especially since the courts are closed. So it's really your only option. But it's a really good time to get together and just negotiate this. Try to work something out because, all parties want the parties with whom they do contracts, or the parties with whom they do business with, to be around after this. And if them performing their obligations is going to mean that they have to file for bankruptcy, that's not really going to do, like, let's say, a landlord any good anyway. So if you're saying, hey, I have no income, paying rent for 3 months without any income, it's going to mean that I'm going to go under. Well, the landlord kind of has an interest in helping work with you, right? So it's a good time to start those conversations. Okay, that's contracts. Now let's talk about other resources that might be available to you. Facebook is offering grants for advertising credits. So if you are starting a new business, you're pivoting your business, or you're trying to find a way to, meet consumer needs now in this quarantine economy, an entirely different economy, see if those grants might be something that you would qualify for and could benefit from. Like I said, there's the SBA loans. There was the PPL, the Paycheck Protection loans. Even though they're on hold right now, I suspect that they will get funded with additional capital, and they will be back on the table. Most lenders are allowing people to go a few months without paying their mortgage if you show sufficient financial hardship, so that's available to you. There are lots of other lending and grant programs that are popping up left and right, that even many that I've probably missed since I last looked at it, because this landscape is changing rapidly to try to meet the needs of this absolute catastrophe of an economy, right? So that's all I've got for you right now. I'm probably going to continue making videos with COVID resources as this thing proceeds. I understand this is a scary time, and I understand the temptation to just sort of tunnel and, ignore what's going on, or maybe even give up hope, and start writing the obituary for the business that you built and love. But I'd encourage you not to do that. Use this time to rest. Use this time to stay healthy. try to find a way to serve this new economy, try to find a way to serve businesses, or consider starting new businesses while you're in this quarantine. This is the time to get things off the ground that you might not otherwise have ever had. So there is opportunity here. There are going to be big winners from this. And I don't mean to sound callous because obviously, people are dying. But what I mean on the economic front is there are going to be people that take advantage of the situation. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean there are always people who are good at reading the writing on the walls and showing up to meet the needs of the new economy and the new world. And you might be able to be one of them. So I wish you luck, but most of all, I wish you health. Thank you.